KJ's going to run it again. Diving, fumbles the ball, and Chappelle's got it. Tyreek Chappelle in the right spot as he hands it off to Richardson. Here he goes. Wow, can you believe this? The holder, and here is Cam Little to take the lead for the Hogs. It hit the top and rains down into the end zone.
Guys, I am so sorry for that edit. As soon as the play happened versus Auburn last week, where Jimbo's standing on the field and the scoop and score defender runs right by him while Jimbo just watches the play happen while he's on the field, I knew I had to apply that look to those two Arkansas plays last year. The wheels started turning as soon as it happened, and I had to throw it in there, and I had to show it to you guys. And I know those two plays, they poke fun at Arkansas. They were the reason Arkansas lost that game. Those two plays maybe changed the outlook on Arkansas' season last year. Major plays, major errors. But those two plays are kind of a microcosm of how this series works at Jerry World. It's always a crazy game. It's always a wild matchup. You can always expect the unexpected with that game. It's the last year it's going to happen. Is the craziness going to go away when we go home and home? I don't know. But it's a huge game for both programs. For Texas A&M, obviously, after you lose the early game to Miami, your margin for error significantly decreases. As you're coming off of a 5-7 year, you're trying to turn the program around a little bit, kind of trying to change the mojo. So after an early loss to Miami, you really want to go out there and get some wins to kind of erase that from your recent memory. If you lose another one early to a winnable team versus Arkansas in a winnable game, you're going to feel really bad because you have Alabama and then on the road at Tennessee coming next. So it's very much a must-win game for A&M, just like it is for Arkansas. Talk about a team in wounded animal mode. Arkansas played in a very, very close competitive game versus LSU last week. They almost beat LSU at home, a really good LSU team, and Arkansas looked damn good on the road. But the week before that is really the black cloud that kind of hangs over Arkansas's early 2023 season. That loss to BYU, a competitive yet very sloppy game for Arkansas, a game that many Arkansas fans wish they had back because they expected to win their games going into a very, very tough opening SEC stretch on the season for Arkansas. 4 games away from Arkansas in a row versus SEC opponents. So they really, really wish they had that one versus BYU because if they did squeeze that one out at the end, in a very close loss to LSU, a game you probably maybe should expect to lose on the road, and they performed a lot better than maybe you would have expected, they would have felt so good about their outlook on the year right now. But that loss to BYU makes this game versus A&M, a winnable game for Arkansas, that much more important. So we're going to break down Arkansas. We're going to talk about their team, their strong suits, their weaknesses maybe, talk about their coaching staff, and at the end we're going to talk about A&M and kind of just talk about this matchup as a whole. And at the end of this video, I'm going to give you my score prediction on the game. So stay tuned for that. But first, if you like this kind of content, if you like Aggie content, game previews, if you're an opposing fan, please consider subscribing to this channel. We have a lot of fun. We have a great comment section. A lot of good discussion goes on in there. I appreciate all of you guys for being here. Thank you. So let's get into it. So just like Texas A&M's first 2 Power 5 matchups of the year, Arkansas brings in 2 new coordinators for the offense and the defense. Offensively, out goes Kendall Briles, and in comes Dan Enos for his second stint at Arkansas. Dan Enos is more of a multiple style offensive coordinator, kind of stepping away from that pure spread look that Kendall Briles brought to Arkansas, maybe more willing to bring in a couple more tight ends, more power looks, and we thought maybe take KJ Jefferson under center a little bit more, which really hasn't been the case this year, but they definitely utilized the tight end and power looks a little bit more. Defensively, out with Barry Odom, in with co-coordinators in Travis Williams and Marcus Woodson. Marcus Woodson coming from FSU, who was really successful at turning around FSU's pass defense in the seasons he was there. So it's something that Arkansas really needed, knowing that they had a lackluster secondary last year, and that was a major weakness for them. And with that secondary, pretty much rebuilding that thing from the ground up. And that's kind of a theme for Arkansas. A lot of transfer portal additions that are mainstays on this Arkansas team now. So you're going to have a much different look than you did last year versus Arkansas with the 2 new coordinators and a bunch of new players all over the field. Offensively, obviously, KJ Jefferson is there. It feels like he's been there forever. We know what to expect from KJ, and that is typically a pretty dang good game versus Texas A&M. You know, KJ's a grizzled vet now. He has great pocket presence, great pocket awareness, but he seems to still lack that consistency that Arkansas fans thought they might see from him this year. He definitely had his best game of the year, looking like old KJ versus LSU, but versus BYU, maybe not taking what was given to him, maybe making a couple of poor decisions running the ball, but you know what you get from KJ. He's a veteran, he's a leader, and he's an absolute load to take down. We don't know if Raheem Rocket Sanders is going to play as of right now. I think it's a true questionable tag. He was questionable going into the LSU game last week. You know how these programs are. They're not going to give you all of the information with these injuries. They're not going to give you the full rundown. So we really don't know if he's going to play or not. I would lean towards him not playing, but definitely don't be surprised if you do see him maybe in a limited capacity versus Texas A&M. But they do have a couple of other serviceable guys in Dominion and Green. Dominion more of the between the tackles power runner, not necessarily a big guy, but definitely more powerful than the other guy in Green. But Green can get it done too. They've both had some success early in this year, but they really hope they get Rocket Sanders back, who is obviously one of the best running backs in all the nation when he's healthy. Their receiver group is pretty much brand new from the ground up. They bring in transfers from all over the country, including a kid out of Texas A&M Commerce in Armstrong who looked really, really good versus LSU. The D2 superstar in Tesla, Teslaa, and it's pronounced Tesla, not Tesla. Apparently that's how it goes. But this receiver group is huge, and they also have another guy who is 6'7". These two guys are 6'4" that I just mentioned. It's a really big, handsy wide receiver group. They're not the quickest. They're not going to burn you, but they're really, really good at contested catches. And that does scare me a little bit versus A&M's somewhat shaky corner play. How is DeBerry going to do on an island versus these guys? Chappelle, the safeties. It's going to be a real test for these guys. They should be able to match up with them in coverage, but when the ball is in the air and there's contested grabs, how are these guys going to compete with these sure-handed big bodies? The most effective receiver on the year for them, I believe, is their tight end. He's a true freshman, but he's one of the highest rated players on this team, and he has absolutely showed out in their last few games. Look for him to be a major target for KJ in this game. Texas A&M was really good at stopping a solid tight end from Auburn last week. He didn't really get involved, but they didn't have the quarterback that Arkansas is going to have to spread the ball to him. So this receiver group is brand new. It's a new look. It's not going to be any of the guys we're used to seeing, but they've had a pretty good start to the year, and they're pretty promising. They're all really experienced, not in SEC play, but from wherever they transferred from. So it's going to be a big group. It's going to really test these corners. Their offensive line has been a very much up and down group for the year. They lose 3 starters from last year. They bring some guys in from the portal. It's very much a rebuild, although it's not a total rebuild. It's a very new look. And they've looked really good at times, but then they've also looked really bad at times. And that kind of happens within like a drive or within one game, where they're going to look really good one play, and then the next play it'll be an egregious holding call or a false start or just a blow-by. It's really, really weird to see because they'll block a play perfectly. They'll open up a huge hole for one of their backs, and then the next play they'll just fall apart. And that was definitely the main reason they lost to BYU. It was offensive line penalties down the stretch, penalties across the board versus BYU. They had 14 penalties that game. And then versus LSU, in a raucous environment, they had 11 penalties. So not that much cleaner, but not quite as egregious. And it's a little bit more excusable on the road. Now, this will be a neutral environment, probably not as much sound affecting the pre-snap stuff. So they look for them to clean it up just a little bit compared to that LSU game. This offensive line can move some bodies, and they're pretty solid. But will they put a clean game together? Defensively, like I said, very much rebuilt from the transfer portal, especially in that secondary. They got several guys out of the portal, including a former 5-star out of Georgia. They've been pretty solid this year, but they did give up quite a bit versus LSU, which was obviously their best passing attack they've faced on the year. Is Texas A&M's passing attack comparable to LSU's? I think we'd like to believe it's not too much behind that. Of course, they have the more experienced, high-level quarterback, but Texas A&M's quarterbacks are nothing to scoff at. I know we're going to see Max Johnson instead of Connor Wigman this game, but we all are pretty confident in Max Johnson to go out there and deliver the ball and feed the studs, which is what Bobby Petrino likes to do. So it'll be a very intriguing matchup to see how these receivers do against this new-look secondary. And Noah Thomas should be back this game. Jimbo indicated that he should be back in his Monday presser. So you should have the receivers in full force versus this Arkansas team. Because last year, Noah Thomas hadn't really come into his own yet. He really didn't until really late in the year. Anais got hurt halfway through this game, and Evan Stewart had his first touchdown versus Arkansas. So a much stronger wide receiver look going at this Arkansas defense this year. Now, of course, two mainstays that you will not be seeing on this Arkansas this year are Drew Sanders and Bumper Poole, two players that seem to come up with big plays every time that Texas A&M played against them. You would think that's a huge loss to this defense, and it is. It's a huge loss, especially in the experience realm. But their new guys in Chris Paul Jr. and Jaheim Thomas have been pretty dang good to start the year. Both are leading this defense in total tackles. Both seem to be all over the field. I think Arkansas is pretty happy with their linebacker play as of right now. They have some pretty good edge rushers. Number 40 can really get after it. They have a couple of other big guys on the D-line. It should be a solid defensive line. I don't think it's a world beater kind of a defensive line, but definitely solid. And they rotate two waves of D linemen in and out of the game. But the rest of the defense, they don't rotate that much. That was kind of a something that I noticed out of that LSU game. Very much the same guys in the linebacker group in the secondary for most of the game. So you feel like A&M could maybe wear them down over the course of the game, but you never know. That's something to look out for, is how much they're rotating out there. They didn't rotate much versus LSU. But it's a solid defense, guys. It's a true test for Texas A&M's offense that we feel really good about. Bobby Petrino coaching against his former team. You feel like both teams are going to have wrinkles that they're going to let out versus the opposition this week, because it's such a huge game. So with this matchup, it's kind of funny. I think it really comes down to the same thing for both teams, because both teams have struggled with offensive penalties, stalling out drives, stalling in the red zone, settling for 3 instead of 7. And both teams are going to look to rectify that in this very, very big game. I truly expect Arkansas's absolute best possible look versus Texas A&M, because it's all hands on deck, back against the wall. But Texas A&M is in a very similar situation. So both teams, it kind of comes to this game. It's very much a crossroads game, kind of in the middle of the season. Which team is going to win this game and feel really good going forward into SEC play? I think if both teams play very well, Texas A&M should be able to out-talent Arkansas, wear them down, and end up being a stronger team in the fourth quarter. But I don't know if that's going to happen. If Texas A&M comes out and doesn't play a clean game, they have some of the same penalties that plagued them versus Auburn, A&M's probably going to lose this game. You have to play clean. You can't have pre-snap penalties. You can't have holding calls. The same thing goes for Arkansas. So it's very, very even in that department, in the keys to the game department. But I think, like I said, if both teams peak, A&M should win this game, just based on talent and based on the level of athlete you're going to see on the field. So with that, I'm going to give you my score prediction. I think it's another insane, wacky game. And you know what? Maybe this is the wackiest one yet, because it's the last one. It's such a big game for both teams. I think we're going to see a wild, razor-close ending to this game. But I do think Texas A&M ends up squeezing it out at the end, 38-35. Potentially a walk-off field goal situation. It's going to be another heart attack of a game. It's going to be another super close, competitive, crazy game. But I do think the Ags get it done with a late push on the game. So guys, what do you think about my score prediction? What's your score prediction, and what are your keys to the game? It's going to be a crazy game. It's going to be a high stress, high heart rate kind of a game. I wonder what our heart rates are going to average across this game. I'm guessing mine will be around 140 for most of this game. So give me your thoughts on the games, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you after the game. Gig 'em.